Jalen McMillan is going to miss extended time and start the season on injured reserve. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs. He is Evan Klosky at eKlosky WTSP. We are your credentialed members of the media covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Of course, Evan is on 10 Tampa Bay, 10tampabay.com, and the 10 Tampa Bay Plus app. And I am here with you 5 days a week, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. No preseason for Baker Mayfield, and the top bubble battles coming up in a little bit, but more bad news for the Bucs as Todd Bowles told the media the wide receiver Jalen McMillan suffered a severe neck strain and will miss extended time. Rick Stroud of the Tampa Bay Times then followed that up by reporting that McMillan will start the season on injured reserve with a return designation, but might not be back until after the Week 9 bye. Yikes.
Yep.
Evan, Chris Godwin is already going to start the season on the PUP list. He's going to miss the first 4 games. Now, J-Mac appears to be out for about half the season. How much is this going
to
At
least.
How much is this going to hurt the offense, especially with some of the defenses that they're going to have to face early on?
You can't afford another injury. Like, this is the last stand, offensively speaking. This is the last stand before I say, time to worry. Like, you have Evans, you have Ibuka, you have Bucky, you have Rashad, you have 4 of your 5 returning offensive linemen. Hopefully, Tristan Wirfs comes back in due time here, and that absence isn't too long. You have Cade Otton. You have Payne Durham. You can do enough with those pieces. You can maybe lean into more 12 personnel. You can maybe lean into more 21 personnel. There are ways to get creative. Now, Josh Grizzard luckily got to see it. Took a back seat last year to Liam Cohen and him navigating through this hell. But now he's got to be the driver. And you have to wonder how he's going to figure that out. Luckily for the Bucs, I know that Grizzard is a grinder. And he's certainly going to – work ethic is not going to be the problem with him. It just sucks. So you got to be a team that holds its water up until that bye week. And hopefully – things start to crystallize. But yeah, I mean, entering the season, you run out an offense of Mike, Chris, Jalen, Ibuka, Bucky, Cade. Like, at some point you start drawing comparisons to 2020, 2021 when you can out-athlete any scheme. It doesn't matter. Just we're too good. You can't cover it all. And now they're kind of back to just being a really good offense. And I'm super high on Ibuka. I think he can handle the pressure of that. And obviously Mike is him. So, yeah, it's a tough blow. It sucks. I think it was somewhat preventable, but I'm not ready to sound the alarms quite yet. But if they start 0-2, it's going to be hard to tell fans to be optimistic if some of these guys aren't coming back from injury. And we haven't even started the regular season. Like, there are more injuries to come.
Well, you have Godwin starting on the pup, so he's missing the first 4 games anyway. You're at Atlanta, you're at Houston, you're home against the Jets, you're home against the Eagles. You know, those are, I know nobody expects the Jets to be world beaters, but those are 4 tough defenses where you're now without Godwin and McMillan. But then beyond that, at Seattle, home against the Niners, at the Lions, at the Saints, before you're hitting your bye week. So you're talking about some really, really good defenses, especially on the road where you're going to be without McMillan. And real quick, before we move on to kind of the next point, is to all the people that said how stupid it was that the Bucs drafted Emeka Egbuka in the first round, I'm wondering if they've kind of changed their mind looking at what's going on with this team offensively. But, you know, we're going to talk bubble battles later, but we've talked a lot on this show about the competition at receiver, whether it's, you know, by myself or you and I discussing the wide receiver battle in training camp. Well, it looks like another spot has now opened up. So to you, which of those bubble guys does this benefit the most that can now look at the door opening of McMillan being out and saying, you know what, maybe I wasn't going to make the 53 before, but now I have a chance to prove myself this week and then in the final preseason game against Buffalo?
I think in terms of I think it benefits maybe a Sterling Shepard the most in terms of playing time. But in terms of making the team, I think Trey Palmer might have been the biggest beneficiary here. I was kind of thinking, I mean, his name has been floated in trade rumors for weeks now. It's been out there, not that it's been incessant, but it's been out there. And we've seen a couple of trades. You start wondering, and hey, can we get something for Trey? You know, some sort of draft compensation to at least walk away with something when we let him go. And now you might want to keep him because he's familiar with everything and it's a less of an onboarding issue. So, you know, we'll get into this more a little bit later, but I think that Palmer is probably the biggest beneficiary, and I don't mean the word beneficiary considering the injury, and I know that Trey isn't viewing it as a benefit either. Just if we're talking in terms of maybe making the team or getting more snaps, that's the guy I'd point to.
Yeah, and you know, he was a guy that I kind of thought, you know, was basically out of it already, just because he hasn't been available. He did return to practice on Tuesday, so that certainly helps him. And then Cam Johnson returned at the end of last week, but didn't play in the game. So you have some of these wide receivers now that were battling anyway, returning to practice. But you have guys that stood out like Ryan Miller, who has been there the entire time, and he's going to have a shot now. But like you said, Sterling Shepard stepped up big last year when Mike and Chris both went down. Cade Otton stepped up big when they went down. So we know that the Bucs can do it. It's just a matter of this isn't quite the offense that we thought we were going to see, at least early on in the season, because they're already ravaged with injury.
Yeah, and you're going to have to get by, and that's the problem. Instead of maybe being the explosive offense we thought, and this is going to be a challenge for the defense. The defense is going to have to step up. Last year the defense got hurt, and the offense, you know, was able to bully through a lot of things. And even when the offense got injured, they found ways to get points. The offense needs help from the defense. And as I said, I still think this is a very good offense as is. It's just tough when you lose, you know, you're removing 2 of your best players out of that receiving core. But the Egbuka signing has likely saved this team from a full-blown panic.
All right. Well, something else that has me a little bit concerned is the fact that there's no preseason for Baker Mayfield. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. You could roll with Josh Allen to get back-to-back MVPs at plus 600, or be like me and take the Buccaneers to win the Super Bowl at plus 2,500. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. NFL fantasy draft season is here. So for your second listen, go find the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast with hosts Vinny Iyer and Michelle Madjuk. Listen every day to prep for your fantasy draft to become the most informed manager so you can take home your league's trophy this season. Find Locked On Fantasy Football on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. For those of you that listen to my Fantasy Focus, and I ranked Emeka Egbuka as the number 1 buck that I'm making sure that I leave my drafts with, that draft price is going up. Be aware, because he is not falling to between the 9th and the 11th rounds anymore after all this went down with Jalen McMillan. But Todd Bowles told the media on Tuesday that basically Baker Mayfield's not playing in the preseason. He said, quote, "I feel like the experience of the quarterback and how he practices has something to do with it, and it's the chemistry with everybody going in sync. So I feel like him and Grizz are in sync right now. I don't feel like I need to play him the last game," end quote. I have been very vocal about the need for Baker to get preseason snaps. I understand that joint practices are helpful, but they're not games. You cannot replicate game speed in practice no matter what you do. I broke down the performances of Joe Burrow over the first 2 weeks of every season in his career, because the Bengals notoriously never play the starters in the preseason, and they notoriously get off to horrendously slow starts. So, do you think, Evan, that the Bucs are in danger of starting slow now because Baker's first action will be week 1 on the road against the Falcons?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to go through all of the quarterbacks who have never played in the preseason and see if there's a trend there. Like, I know what Cincinnati's doing, and Joe Burrow sitting out and needing to get back in. But I don't know if I make much of that for veterans. Like, they've been around the block. They know what they're seeing. Not to mention, Baker goes up against Todd Bowles, and he complicates defenses more than what will happen on Sunday. So he's being tested. My opinion is that if you were going to play the starters, Baker should have been in there. Unless there's an injury we don't know about and he's, trudging forward. But which I don't expect to be the case, by the way. But if you were going to play the starters, Baker should have been in there, because operationally speaking, he is the one that is doing most of the work with these people. I find it ludicrous that they brought a guy off the street who was a coach in high school last year, had 2 weeks under his belt, had to meet with Thad Lewis like the night or two before, go through 12-something plays that he felt comfortable with, mentioned after the game that he only threw 1 ball to Emeka Egbuka since being here. And that's the guy you chose to run your offense with the ones. And look, Teddy did great in that game, but he was rusty, and the start was a little wobbly, and he sailed the ball, and it cost Jalen McMillan at least 8 games. And I'm sure it's going to be a little bit more than that. So, or I'm guessing it's going to be a little bit more than that. Not sure. So I just think that it's not necessarily that, like, I'm actually very pro playing starters in the preseason at least once, but I don't care if you don't do it, but then just have everybody not do it. So I think that hindsight 2020, they messed that one up. And look, Jalen McMillan and Ibuka played the week prior. Nothing bad happened. They played with Trask. So you could have also put Trask in there, who's been around the block a while in Tampa Bay and understands the system dating back to last year and then all your off-season work. So you can't just there is a cutoff. Like anybody who's going to sniff a Sunday during the regular season, you can't just say oh, don't play. Like these rosters are only so big, and those guys were only supposed to play 10 or 15 plays anyway. It just happened to be the third play of the game or whatever it was, and it's unfortunate and unlucky. But yeah, I mean that's why I said it's kind of preventable because I had a tweet that was very interesting that Teddy Bridgewater is starting at quarterback. I was just like, really? That's a move. Huh? So I don't know. We can't go back in time anyway and change it. So it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, and even I, who was, I kind of debated it back and forth with you. I had mentioned it on the show before that I truly believed that Teddy was going to overtake Trask as the quarterback too. But even I'm sitting there I don't like this. First off, I think Trask earned the spot with those starters. And if it was a true competition, I get the Bowles wanted to see him out there with the first team. I get that he wanted him to not be in, garbage time for as much as any preseason game can be considered in garbage time. But, at the same time, he'd only been there for 12 days. He hadn't played with those guys long enough to say, you know what, go ahead, go for it. Who cares? It was really, really frustrating. Now, I will say I learned right before we started recording, and maybe this will help the Bucs a little bit, that even if the offense does get off to a slow start because Baker doesn't have those preseason reps, you know who else isn't taking a single snap in preseason? Michael Penix Jr. And I think he would need preseason snaps more than Baker would need preseason snaps. As you mentioned, you're talking about a veteran guy who, has been doing this for years, who's going up against Todd Bowles defense in practice every single day. So, maybe the Falcons are kind of staring the same thing in the face.
I think that, I don't know. That one's an interesting one. They didn't really play Penix last year in the preseason. Not doing it this year. You wonder if there's some gamesmanship here. We don't want to put any tape with our starting quarterback out there for the opponent to see week one, considering it's a divisional game. So there's something to be said about that. But, look, Baker Mayfield could have started and got hurt in the third play, and we'd all be like, ah. So that's why I'm saying, for me, it's not necessarily playing or not playing. It's if you're going to play the starters, all the starters should be on there. If you're not, then just don't play them. Don't play the key guys at least, I don't need to see Antoine. I don't need to see Mike, Levante, Baker, Gedeke, Mao. At some point in the offensive line, these guys need, there's only so many of them. But I think that's just my bigger point.
All right. Well, we are talking about the top bubble battles. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and the lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. And it's not just sporting events. You guys know that I use Game Time whenever I'm shopping for tickets for anything, and I have 2 concerts lined up for my sons and I in the coming months thanks to Game Time's zone deals that got me some incredible seats. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Wrapping things up here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. We have one preseason game left, lots of positions that still need to be decided. I mentioned on yesterday's show that Bowles kind of called out the remaining safeties after J.J. Roberts went down to season-ending injured reserve. You have a wide receiver spot that is opened up now. You have linebackers that are duking it out. You have corners that are trying to make the roster. You have backup center battle. You have all these things going on. So, Evan, heading into the final preseason game, what are your top 3 bubble battles that you're really going to be keeping an eye on and, watching these players that have the chance to make the 53-man roster?
Well, the first one is outside linebacker, considering the words that Bowles said to Watts, Ramirez, Peoples. Like, do they have the answer in-house now that David Walker is out, or are they going to have to go out and find something? I am intrigued to see what happens at the end of the bench on the offensive line. Last year, they entered the season with 9. And so you got Wirfs, Gedeke, Barton, Malk, Bredesen. Did I say Bredesen already? No. Wirfs, Gedeke, Barton, Malk, Bredesen, Klein, Heck. That's 7. Then you have guys like Michael Jordan, Jake Majors, Chukwuma, Raekwon O'Neal, Sua Opeta. And then, Luke Haggard, Ben Scott, Tyler McClellan. So, there's at least 2 spots, I think, up for grabs there. Certainly, with a project like Ben Chukwuma, we're interested in him. Wide receiver is extremely interesting. We haven't seen Trey Palmer or Cameron Johnson in a game. What do they look like? And considering the injuries there, they're going to have to dip into the reserves. Luckily, think about this. They're not going to have Jalen McMillan or Godwin begin the season. So between Evans and I can't even count Ibuka and Tez, Evans, Shepard, Ryan Miller, Rakim Jarrett, Cameron Johnson. Those are and Jacob Harris. Those are 6 guys who have played NFL snaps, and a lot of them. So that's a decent luxury to have. Again, nobody on there is you're going to want on your fantasy team, but there's experience. They'll know where to be. So seeing kind of who steps up alongside Trask, Bridgewater throwing, we don't really know. If what's going to happen with the QB, Bazelak will be out there, but otherwise, that's kind of what I'm looking at. Safety, I think, is pretty much locked up now with Antoine, Tyke, Izzy, Merriweather. Then cornerback, I think. So last year they did 6 and 5, 6 cornerbacks, 5 safeties. This year I think they might do 7 and 4, where you get Dean McCollum, Morrison, Parrish, Hall, Vildor, Josh Hayes, with the last 2 being special teamers. Pretty good on that. I also got to give a quick glance at Nick Jackson and Bullock. They carried 4 inside linebackers last year. Will that be 5 now? With David Dennis, Walker Jr., Deion Jones, Nick Jackson, and then Bullock to the practice squad? We don't know. But that's also an intriguing one. And then I guess, you got to decide whether you want 5 or 6 defensive linemen with C.J. Brewer and Mike Green. They're battling it out.
Yeah, well, and of course, we'll have our roster predictions coming up next week. But yeah, I'm 100% with you that, definitely keeping an eye on the receivers, definitely keeping an eye on the linebackers. I don't feel like Merriweather's a lock. I agree that he's the front runner, but I don't think it's sold yet. And I think kind of the benefit there, I did say on yesterday's show that Merriweather would have to have kind of a bad week and Wisdom would have to really play extremely well. But, to me, I think Bowles would be kind of enamored with having a guy like Wisdom on the roster just because he's another version of Izzian, where he can play nickel, he can play both safety spots. He's really, really versatile, which we know is a big reason that Bowles loves Izzian so much.
And let me say this about Rashad, because I love that kid. Hand up, covered him at UTSA. Family's awesome. He's got a great backstory. And if he makes the 53-man roster, maybe I'll dig into it a little bit more. But you said it right. Like, Wisdom's on this roster, like certainly a practice squad guy. But he's on this team because he is that Antoine Winfield Jr., Christian Izzian type of build, right? Short, stocky, move him nickel outside safety, where he, it's the chess pieces that Todd Bowles likes to use. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. Tyke Smith didn't practice on Tuesday. Don't think it's a big deal. He was kind of running around. Izzian, Bowles was not super confident that he would be ready week 1. It's an oblique, so you don't really know what those things. He could be ready. He could not be ready. Depends how it heals. So if you're Bowles and you're thinking, man, even Rashad can probably cosplay as a Tyke too, but maybe you say to yourself, we got Antoine, Izzian's out week 1, we got Tyke, I'm going to have to play a certain style with these guys. And Merriweather's just a different type of safety than what we have here. And is it best to put him on the roster, or do I want to just keep building kind of this archetype that I got? So I think that's a fair question to bring up. I just lean towards Merriweather because he was bumped off the team, brought back on the team, and Bowles has sung his praises since coming back, saying, he joked, he's like, hey, I didn't think that he really liked me much after that, but, he's been very proud of him since returning from the Lions last year for that week or two. So I that's why I lean towards Merriweather, not based on my opinions, but based on what Bowles has said in the past of just how much he likes Merriweather, and he got a decent amount of run last year with all their injuries.
Yeah, and I really like Merriweather, but I think it is, as you noted, it's important to look at stylistically what kind of safeties are you using and who fits that mold. And to be fair to Wisdom, if I remember correctly, I know he was balling out at the beginning of camp, but didn't he get hurt and miss a lot of camp, and that kind of ended up affecting
last year?
Yeah.
No, Wisdom didn't get hurt.
He didn't. Okay, I must be thinking of somebody else. Then. I was thinking
this year, Marcus Banks got hurt and then got put off the team, injured, waived. I'm trying to think of last year who was in that world. Whatever. But no, it was not him.
It'll come to both of us as soon as we're done recording, because that's
Wisdom. If I remember correctly, I know Wisdom definitely had a fumble recovery in the preseason last year. I believe he was a part of 2 turnovers, or maybe it was maybe I'm thinking those joint practices, and it all melds together now. But I remember last year him forcing some turnovers, and that kind of earned him his spot on the practice squad.
All right. Well, Evan, what do we have going on over at 10 Tampa Bay, 10tampabay.com, and the 10 Tampa Bay Plus app?
Hey, remember, in a couple of weeks here, we're going to start the Blitz. You'll be able to find that on 10 Tampa Bay Plus. You can watch the Ultimate Florida Sports Show. I do it with my friends up there in Jacksonville. We will talk through Bucs, Jags, Dolphins, Rays, whatever is kind of happening in the Sunshine State. We will go through it. And that's about a 30-minute show. So you can find that on 10 Tampa Bay Plus. You can find my Sportscast, 6, 6:30, and 11 on 10 Tampa Bay Plus. So check us out. And then, of course, at eClosky WTSP on the X. Hit me up. Love to interact.
All right. Yeah, make sure you are checking out all of that stuff. Make sure that you are following along on YouTube as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Follow on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs, at eClosky WTSP. We have a couple of days left of this Mount Rushmore battle that we're in with the Saints. And I got to say, I'm proud of you, Bucs fans. I'm proud of you, because when that thing started, Ross and his 21,000 followers, we only had like 17% of the vote. Right now, we have 57% of the vote. So make sure that you are going to those Twitter accounts. If you haven't already, vote for the Bucs, retweet it. We have to defeat Ross, because he has 3 times the amount of followers I plus the Locked On Bucs account have combined. And it's just not fair. So we have to really band together on this one. Make sure that you are following on Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Bucs in both of those spots. Become an insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. If you want to support the show, but you don't want to be an insider, it's real easy. Like this episode on YouTube, leave a 5-star review wherever you get podcasts. It does help other Buccaneers fans find the show. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.